Celebrating our 125th anniversary, the MSBA takes pride in advocating on behalf of the legal profession and connecting with those in public office. We've had tremendous success in defeating the taxation of legal services and ensuring that attorneys on the front lines of justice had access to COVID-19 vaccines. This past legislative session, we drafted and secured passage of bills that directly impact our practitioners and Marylanders, including bills that modernize estates and trust practice and ones that positively impact businesses. We enhance our advocacy by maintaining these positive relationships with those in public office, and we're excited today to speak with Delegate Lierman. We invite you to visit our website, MSBA Connects with the Candidates, and our YouTube channel to view all of the insightful conversations we've had over the past year with over 20 candidates for the offices of Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and Attorney General. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Shali. The Maryland Association of CPAs is the only statewide professional membership organization dedicated to serving the needs of their thousands of member Maryland-certified public accountants, including students working in the practice, industry, government, and education. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jeff Lawson, CPA, and Chair of MACPA's State Tax Committee and Vice President of Tax and Administration for American Trading and Production Corporation, for brief welcoming remarks as well. Jeff?
Thank you. Good morning, I'm Jeff Lawson. As David said, I'm the chair of the Maryland Association of CPAs State Tax Committee. We're so glad you could join us today. On behalf of the MACPA and our 8,000 members throughout the state, I'd like to welcome you to this important forum. As certified public accountants, our members understand in particular the importance of the role of Comptroller of Maryland. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from Delegate Lierman. Sad we can't hear from County Executive Glassman to look forward to learning about your vision and plans for the office if elected as the next Maryland Comptroller. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And we would also like to recognize RSNF as an event sponsor, and specifically Vadim Ranjas, Tax Director at RSNF, who is both an attorney and a CPA, members of both associations who really played a very big role in putting together this morning's event. Vadim, thank you so much. And I guess as a member of both associations, you have to pay dues to both associations. Is that how it works? In any event, I'm glad to see you and some of your colleagues who are here survived last night, the end of 2021 tax season. As I mentioned earlier, this event is taped and shared live by the Maryland Bar Association on their website and their YouTube page, msba.org. So check that out if you're so inclined. Okay, so now to the reason hopefully most of you are here this morning. It's my pleasure to introduce the Democratic candidate for Maryland Comptroller, Maryland Delegate Brooke Lierman. Brooke is a civil rights and disability rights attorney, a mother of two, a state delegate representing the 46th legislative district, and the Democratic nominee to be Maryland's state comptroller. In the House of Delegates, Brooke served for 5 years as a member of the Appropriations Committee, helping to craft balanced state budgets before assuming a leadership role on the Environment and Transportation Committee. Brooke also serves as the House Chair for the Joint Committee on Pensions, sits on the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, and founded and formerly co-chaired the Maryland Transit Caucus. So Brooke, I'd like to ask you to just, before we get into some questions, take a couple minutes for some opening remarks, either come to the podium or stay close to where you are. Thank you for joining us this morning. How about a welcome for Brooke Lierman?
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, good morning. Thank you, especially those of you who had late nights last night finishing up taxes. Thanks for being here bright and early. Thank you to Goucher College for hosting us. Thank you to MACPA for pulling this together, and to MSBA. I am proud to be the only nominee for Comptroller who's an MSBA member. And I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you all, folks who know what the Comptroller does. It's really a pleasure. I have had the honor for the past 2 years of traveling around the state. I have been to Pocomoke City and Rising Sun and Oakland and St. Mary's and Leonardtown and everywhere in between, talking with people about this office. You know how important this office is, but many people don't, because there has not been an open seat for state comptroller since 1998. And we know that the Constitution mandates that this office, the Office of Comptroller, has the general superintendence of the fiscal affairs of the state of Maryland. In other words, it's the elected CFO of our state. And as the elected CFO, we need somebody. After having conversations with people around the state, I've put together that, people really believe we need somebody who can embrace creative solutions, who can bring people together to tackle the big challenges that we're facing, the racial wealth divide, the challenge of infrastructure funding for climate change, how we fund and pay for our public schools, but who also really appreciates the importance of sweating the small stuff, right? Making it easier to access state programs and benefits, making it simpler to file your tax returns and get your tax refund, making it easier to start and maintain a business in Maryland. So I'm really excited about the work that we can do from the Comptroller's office. I'm proud to have the support of the current Comptroller, and I'm excited to think about how we can build on the work that exists today to really be bold and do better. And all of that depends on being in partnership with you. We all understand that taxes and paying taxes depends on voluntary compliance, right? We also have to make sure that we have strong enforcement mechanisms. And I look forward, as I have over the campaign trail, organizing roundtables with CPAs, as I have throughout my tenure as a state delegate, bringing people together to pass bills, whether it's on opportunity zones and the historic revitalization tax credit, whether it's on the angel investor tax credit, whether it's creating the private letter ruling process, working with all of you. I look forward to pulling people together regularly to understand what's working and what's not, so that we can make Maryland the best state to live in. So thank you all for being here bright and early. I'm excited for the conversation, and I want you to know that this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. If I'm elected, I look forward to having regular meetings and conversations with all of you to make sure that we're serving Marylanders in the best way possible, and ensuring that we're standing up for our taxpayers and also for our values as Marylanders. So thank you for being here.
So thank you, Brooke. So it was interesting, as you noted in your remarks, it is somewhat unique that Maryland comptrollers tend to serve a long time, right? Louis Goldstein, and then William Donald Schaefer, and Peter Franchot. So I won't ask you to commit to only 20 years in office or anything like that. So these are questions that we've gathered from the leadership and some of the members of the two sponsoring associations. So some are pretty broad, 30,000 foot level, and some are quite specific.
Yep.
So you did talk about the primary role of the Comptroller's office as that of revenue administration. So what would you say is working well, and what needs improvement, to the extent that you're familiar with the office already?
Thanks for that question. Yes, so Revenue Administration, the RAD division, right, in Annapolis. One of the things that I'm excited about is making sure, people often ask me, what's the first thing that you're going to do as comptroller? And I say, well, you can't get anything done in government or in life without a great team, right? And we need to make sure that we have a great and well-supported team in Revenue Administration. There are great people there doing good work, but they need help. We need to make sure that let's be honest, we need to make sure that we can retain and keep good people in all state agencies, and certainly in the Comptroller's office. So I look forward to going to bat for the department to to make sure that we can pay people what they're worth, to make sure we can bring in new people to ensure that we're meeting the needs of Marylanders. And I look forward to modernization. So this is something that many of you know about, but for several years, the Comptroller's Office has been working on implementing the Compass system. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to is ensuring that we actually that we get it done. And that will require additional team members. I've already spoken with some of the folks in the Comptroller's Office about the difficulty and how big it is of a project. But we have to make sure that the Compass system, when it's fully implemented, is providing all the services the folks in this room and Marylanders need, right? Whether you have a tax preparer and a CPA or you don't, we want to make sure what you have when you log in to your online system on the Comptroller's Office, that you can see your past taxes filed, what you owe, where you file, when your refund was sent, when your deposit hit the bank. You should be able to see all of that online. And I want to take it one step further. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is constituent service. And I have some constituents here, and I don't think they would have made it at 8 a.m. if they didn't think I was doing a good job. So I have to say, I take very seriously constituent or customer service. I do think that we need to modernize how we keep track of and ensure that we're handling constituent and customer service in the Comptroller's Office. There's excellent new systems to do customer relation management, right? So that when you call into the office, if you have a question of person one and person one can't answer it, and then you call again and you talk to person two sees what person one told you, right? And so you're not starting from scratch, right? We need to make sure that we're tracking what people need and helping them in that way as well. It will reduce frustration for constituents and consumers. It will reduce frustration for you all if you're calling in as tax preparers or attorneys representing clients. And so that is something that I feel very strongly about in the need to modernize our systems as well. So I'm looking forward to bringing people together from around the Comptroller's Office and Revenue Administration, tax preparers, CPAs, tax attorneys, small business owners, cash campaign, and more, to make sure that as we're building and implementing Compass, that it is really this new online system, that it's going to really meet the needs for everything we need for decades to come.
So for the few people in the audience that might not know what Compass is,
Yep.
could you explain?
Sure. Compass is sort of the new online system that the Comptroller's Office has been working to implement over the past couple years, and that we will be working to implement in the next couple years as well. So we want to make sure that when it's fully implemented, it is the system that we all want and need, and that you can communicate with it and it can communicate with you. We know that this is possible. We've seen it in other states, and there's no reason that Maryland shouldn't have this.
I would say that if by some chance, I loved your answer on the person number one knowing person number two. If by some chance the comptroller thing doesn't work out, I'd love for you to be the head of customer service at Southwest Airlines.
Brooke, can I say, the other thing that I love, that I would love, there are very cool, when you check in at a hotel and you instantly get a text, how was your check-in experience? Like state government.
Yeah.
How was your interaction with the Comptroller's Office? Because that allows us to be constantly improving how we work with people. So
why not? Why not? No, that's great. So you may already have answered this next question, but I'll give you a chance to expand upon it or give a slightly different answer. In terms of what you may be passionate about either fixing, keeping, or getting rid of relative to the current operation of the Comptroller's Office?
Sure. I am passionate about making government work better because I believe in government as a tool to remove barriers and create opportunity. So in whatever capacity I'm in, I feel like I want to do everything I can to make people believe that government can work for them, and I want it to work for them. So whether that's modernizing our systems, making sure we have the best team in place, thinking about how we do outreach as a Comptroller's Office, I want to make sure that we are meeting people where they are to meet their needs. So one thing I'll say is, you all know there are 12 field offices that the Comptroller has all over the state of Maryland. I would love to have those offices be more outward facing. So many people don't know that those offices exist. People don't know about the resources that the Comptroller's office has. I want to make sure that everybody understands, all Marylanders understand that the resources of the Comptroller's office are their resources. It's there for them. These are our taxpayers. These are our constituents. So thinking about how we can have, somebody in the Upper Marlboro office, somebody in the Wheaton office, somebody in the Cumberland office who is working to get out to small businesses in the community, who's working to connect with the main streets, who's working to connect with the colleges and the schools or the community colleges, about financial literacy resources, about how to start a small business, about here's how you pay your taxes and here are some organizations that can help if you need help. I want to make sure that our Comptroller's office is really getting out there and doing the outreach that's needed so that the resources of the office can reach the people of Maryland.
Very good, thank you. So this is a bit more of a technical question, and I probably wouldn't even ask you this, but I understand this was your bill, so you should have some knowledge. So in 2022, legislators approved a legal division within the Comptroller's office to provide tax guidance to taxpayers. The Comptroller has historically taken the position not to develop and issue regulations under the Administrative Procedure Act. What do you see as the most important role for this new legal division, and how do you see it interacting with the other divisions of the Comptroller's office?
Yep, thank you for that. So yeah, I feel very strongly about this bill. The Augustine Commission, which was a commission that was set up many years ago to, I don't know where to look, sorry. The Augustine Commission, which was a commission that was set up many years ago to improve the business climate in Maryland, made a number of recommendations. And one of its recommendations was to create a private letter ruling process. It was never implemented. I mean, this was this was nearly a decade ago. It's one of the only recommendations that was never implemented. And when I started learning about this, I just thought, this is crazy. A private letter ruling process makes so much sense, both as a service to businesses and Maryland taxpayers, but also as a tool with tax compliance, because you can ensure that people, companies and individuals who are asking for these private letter rulings are actually paying what they owe on the front end, rather than having to go back and sue them or audit them after the fact because they interpreted the law in a way that the Comptroller's office didn't think was correct, right? So the private letter ruling process sets up a process, there will be an Office of Legal Division, and if you are a Maryland taxpayer, you will be able to request a legal opinion on how Maryland tax law works with or your specific fact situation, or applies to a specific fact situation. And I just think that's so essential as a service to businesses and taxpayers, and to ensure that those businesses and taxpayers are paying the right amount up, from the get-go. And it's a free service, and nearly every other state and the IRS already does this. So I'm looking forward to fully implementing that legislation. I believe, it will probably be housed within Revenue in Annapolis, because it does have to do with that work. But I'm excited because I think it's one more way to make sure that we are both partnering with businesses, with CPAs, with tax attorneys, with taxpayers, but also ensuring that we're collecting what's owed.
So sort of related, do you think the legal division should be developing administrative guidance and assist in proposing new regulations?
Yes, absolutely. I really do believe it shouldn't be a guessing game what you pay for taxes and how your fact situation is affected by our tax laws, right? We don't want people guessing. We also don't want people, no offense, tax attorneys, having to pay tax attorneys all the time for everything, every little question, right? So we want you to handle the big stuff. So I do think that we should make sure that the legal division can provide guidance to taxpayers, can provide guidance to businesses, can make sure that people understand how to pay their taxes and what regulations affect. Admin law was my favorite law school class, I have to be honest. So I am all about the making sure that the regulations are there and that they're correct, and that there's letters of, guidance letters and papers to make sure that people know what to do.
Great. Thank you. So let's switch gears to the Board of Public Works, if we could.
Sure.
So Maryland's Board of Public Works is kind of unique, as you well know, and there are 3 members, the governor, the treasurer, and the comptroller, and they vote to approve or disapprove thousands of state contracts in the course of the year. The minimum, do you know what it is? Like
$200,000.
$200,000.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty powerful position and what have you. And so the comptroller's office works as also, the comptroller as a check on the state's finances in terms of being fiscally responsible and legal and what have you. So what will your sort of attitude be, your philosophy in terms of your service on the Board of Public Works as it relates to state spending?
Sure. So, the comptroller as an office in the Board of Public Works is, I think, pretty fascinating. Created in the 1800s to sort of combat the rampant fraud that was occurring. And the comptroller was really created for that Board of Public Works to be the independent advocate, right? Because the governor often goes along with what the agencies bring and the contracts that the agencies bring, because the governor appoints the agencies. The treasurer is appointed by the General Assembly, right? So speaks for the General Assembly. So the comptroller is the independent voice, right? Your voice, the voice of Marylanders, the people's advocate on the Board of Public Works. And my philosophy is really based on best value, ensuring that we are achieving best value for our tax dollars. And I think that looks like, I will say, I do procurement law in my legal practice. I represent small blind-owned businesses all over the nation in federal and state procurement. And I have seen the challenges that exist. And also, I have seen how states and the federal government have ended up paying way more than they should have because they prioritized lowest cost instead of best value. So best value is important, and I think it means making sure that we're making good investments, public schools and transportation, water infrastructure, especially with all of this money coming in from the federal government, really being thoughtful about how we spend it, working with the agencies, working with communities to ensure we're spending it well and smart. 2, it means making sure that that money stays in Maryland, making sure that we're working with our small businesses, finally reaching our minority business enterprise goals. We have the second highest goal in the country at 29%. We have the oldest MBE program in the nation, and we never come close to meeting our minority business enterprise goals. And that means that we're not getting best value because in a way we're limiting our competition. And we have too many sole source contracts. And then I also think that we need to be smart about how we spend our money in a long-term way. So when we're building that new school, for instance, making sure we don't build it in a floodplain, right? Making sure that we're thinking about the long-term effect of climate change on our infrastructure, which, by the way, will also impact our bond rating, right? Ensuring that we keep our AAA bond rating by being smart about the effect that changing weather patterns are having, whether it's flooding in new areas, water encroachment in agricultural lands, saltwater encroachment in agricultural lands. I just talked to a group of mayors the other day, and their top 2 concerns for their municipalities and infrastructure was housing and flooding. And so, these are real issues that the Board of Public Works needs to take seriously when spending our money so that we are building not just for our generation, but for generations to come. So that's what best value really means to me, and I'm excited to be a strong and independent voice on the Board of Public Works. And I will add, if my candidate for governor, Wes Moore, wins, and I win, I would be the only lawyer on the Board of Public Works. So excited to be the legal voice as well on the Board of Public Works.
Good for you. So kind of related to your spending philosophy, I think not too long ago, Comptroller Fran Cho announced that Maryland had a $2 billion surplus. Some of it was going into the rainy day fund. Other parts of it are being spent for capital projects on educational institutions and so forth. And we may or may not, right, be heading into a recession. Certainly, the good times of the last several years, as we've known them, have gotten a little bit shaky at the very least.
Yep.
So what's kind of your philosophy toward spending big state money.
Yep.
And should we save it? Should we spend it? Should we invest it? And so forth.
Sure, we should spend wisely. So I think, a couple of things. One is it's after we put money into the rainy day fund, excuse me, it's about $1.2 billion in surplus. And we do need to be thoughtful about how we spend that because we don't know if we'll have that surplus again. Although sales tax and income taxes, as you all know, were much stronger than expected, which helped lead to that. We need to be thoughtful about making sure we're funding our pension obligations. Think about our OPEB obligations to make sure we have money there. And then we need to think about how we can use that money to make sure that we're supporting, I believe, our state government's functionality. For many years, we've been cutting state government services so that they aren't able to respond and they aren't able to do the work that we need them to do. So I do think that we need to make sure that we're retaining. I talk to employers all over the state. One of the biggest concerns is that they can't keep people or they can't hire employees. And part of that is we need to be paying people what they're worth. And in state government, we are not doing that by and large right now. And so to have a state government that's really worthy of Marylanders, we need to make sure that we can have great people there as well. I think there's a number of other infrastructure projects as well, thinking long-term investment. We need to make sure we have money to provide the state match for federal dollars. So we, because of the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, will see billions of additional dollars coming to Maryland by formula. But there's even more money that's available by competitive grant. But to achieve those federal competitive grants, we have to have state matching dollars available. So some of this money should absolutely go to ensuring that we can bring in more federal dollars because we literally then double or triple the money that we have in surplus. And so that's another way that I think we should be thoughtful in spending it.
So, very good, thank you. So let's switch a little bit to economic development in Maryland and the impact that tax laws and tax rates and what have you have on businesses in Maryland. So Maryland has often ranked as a non-friendly taxpayer state. And we have, as a result, and you represent Baltimore City, so you know for sure what's going on in Baltimore City, but even statewide, we've had difficulty attracting businesses and taxpayers, and many of the practitioners in this room are well aware of the number of people who move out of state in order to be treated more favorably from a tax perspective. So talk about what mechanisms, tax incentives and credits and the like, you have in terms of a philosophy to make Maryland a more tax-friendly business state.
Sure. So as you all know, the General Assembly sets tax policy. And so one of the things that I'm looking forward to doing is ensuring that as the General Assembly thinks through its tax policy, that the Comptroller's office is there to offer data and evidence, right? Making sure that we can use the data in the Comptroller's office to help drive decision making. If we are seeing, for instance, I've talked to business owners and entrepreneurs around the state, I feel very passionately that Maryland should be the place where you want to start your business and grow your business. We need to make sure that it's easier to transfer in businesses. We need to make sure it's easier to start a business. And we need to make sure it's easier to pay and comply with tax laws. To do that, one, we need to use the data of the Comptroller's office to help drive decision making in the General Assembly. So offering them ideas, thoughts, input on how what they're considering will impact Maryland small businesses and large businesses and everybody in between so that they truly understand. Number two, we just need to make it easier to pay businesses in this state or to pay taxes in this state. If you're a sole proprietor, it can be really challenging, right? You probably don't have the resources to hire a tax attorney. Often they don't. 60% of sole proprietorships in Baltimore are owned by people of color. And we know that they often are, one-person shops. These are entrepreneurs, and we're seeing even more of them since COVID. So we need to make sure that the Comptroller's office is there to be their advocate and to be their resource and partner so that it's easier to pay taxes and easier to do business in the state. And that's something that I want to make sure that we are very focused on in the Comptroller's office. I'm a little bit of a competitive person. You know, you can't run for office if you're not.
Can't tell.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that, you know, that Marylanders are not moving to Delaware and Pennsylvania when they grow older. I want to make sure that Maryland businesses are not moving to Virginia and North Carolina. And I've had conversations all over the state. In Howard County with cyber companies, in College Park, Quantum, in Baltimore City with, you know, many of the entrepreneurs and startups to talk about, you know, and they say, look, we don't hear from people in Maryland, but we get called by the North Carolina governor all the time, right? We want to make sure that those companies are heard, that they're part of the solution to growing a business here in Maryland, because, you know, today's entrepreneurs are tomorrow's employers. And so to grow a strong and healthy economy, we have to be supporting our small businesses. So I'm excited about that.
So Brooke, let me ask you this. As I think you know, let me give you a personal example. So I was on for many years, the Board of Regents of the University System of Maryland. And the presidents would come to us all the time. We need a new building for this. And I remember one example specifically where there probably still is, I don't know, but there certainly was a pharmacist shortage in Maryland. And so the chancellor came to us and said, you know, we need to spend a couple $100 million to build a new pharmacy building to be able to train more pharmacists because we have a pharmacy shortage. And some of us did a lot of reading, and I'm not saying that was, you know, a bad idea or anything, but many other states were simply giving pharmacists tax incentives to move to their state.
Right.
So in lieu of spending a couple $100 million on a building, they would maybe, you know, I don't know exactly, but lower their state taxes and you know, for 5 years or 10 years in order to move to Maryland. So I don't think we as a state have done a whole lot of creative stuff in that regard. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I will also say that sometimes when we do try to do that type of work, we have set it up in a way that it's hard for employers to take advantage of. You know, so I've talked to some manufacturing companies who, you know, we have some tax credits available if you're hiring somebody who's formerly incarcerated or hasn't been employed for quite a while. Well, you know, when I've talked to several employers, they say to me, like, my employees don't want to tell me that. So I don't know if that is the case for some of them or not. So sometimes we make it difficult for employers to even take advantage of the ones that exist. I will say I worked with some folks here in MSBA and others on the angel investor tax credit, which we did not manage to pass, but which I still strongly believe in, which is about let's make sure that we have the capital in Maryland to build an angel investor economy so that we're building more entrepreneurs here. There's no reason that Maryland shouldn't be competing with, you know, every area in the nation on entrepreneurship. We have, you know, great communities. We have Hopkins, Maryland, Goucher, you know, we have wonderful educational institutions. We should be, you know, the home of so many entrepreneurship ideas. And yet one of the things that holds us back is a lack of capital. And so, you know, I worked on the angel investor tax credit. I've worked this year, I've worked with TEDCO. You know, we're talking about other ideas. This year we passed legislation to help seed, you know, provide some more seed funding for some of these entrepreneurs. But we need to have a supportive ecosystem for entrepreneurs in general in Maryland.
So you mentioned a moment or two ago that correctly, obviously, that the legislature develops tax policy, but but the Comptroller's office sees the money, right? They see who's spending what, they see who may be moving out of state. Do you envision, if elected Comptroller, being a little more active in advising the legislature in terms of policies that they should enact in order to improve the economic situation in Maryland?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because I think it is really important, and I think as a, and I say this as an 8-year legislator, we want information, right? We want to make sure that the policies that we're thinking of actually tackle the challenges that we see. And so being able to have a partner in the Comptroller's office is essential. When I was working on the private letter ruling process, we were talking to the Comptroller's office regularly because it was specifically going to be housed. So Sharon Bernardi and I were on the phone, like making sure it was what it needed to be. But it's on other tax policy ideas as well, making sure that the Comptroller's office is there so that General Assembly members can understand and have backup and also, or have evidence that something they're thinking isn't really going to tackle the issue that they want to tackle, right? Because sometimes we have good ideas, and I say this as a current legislator, we think we have good ideas, and then it turns out the bill that we're proposing is actually not going to solve the problem when we get more information, and we need to be thoughtful about, okay, well, if this approach isn't going to work, we've got to try this new approach, right? And so the Comptroller's office can be there to help with that, and that's something I look forward to.
Very good. So I think as we talked about in the opening, yesterday was the end of tax filing season and so forth, and I think most of the practitioners as well as taxpayers in the audience would recognize that COVID-19 has had quite an impact on processing time of returns and issuing refunds and the like. What are your thoughts on how the office might respond to that?
It's a good question. Obviously, I don't work in the office right now.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what's going on with, and in fact, many of you, you all as tax preparers and CPAs and tax attorneys, you're all filing many more than I am, so you see it more than I do, but I do feel certainly strongly, like I said before, that the Comptroller's office needs additional support and help so that it can do this work more quickly, so that the Comptroller's office understands that they're partnering with you, right? That you are there to work with them to make sure that tax returns are filed properly, that taxes are paid properly, and that refunds come back promptly. And I think this needs to be a partnership relationship to get everything done. And so I look forward to bringing that perspective to the office as well.
And you mentioned earlier the number of physical offices in Maryland. Do you have any thoughts yet on whether that's the right number, we need more, and so on?
It's a good question. I think right now that's where we'll start. I don't want to cut any of them for sure. And we'll see, how effective, employing sort of a building on what's there right now, doing additional outreach and sort of retooling them a little bit, how that will work and how it goes, and excited to really dig into that component of the Comptroller's office to make sure we're providing sort of on the ground, meeting people where they are, getting those resources out to communities.
I know, Brooke, you're someone who puts a lot of emphasis on inclusion and also responsiveness and transparency and so forth. What is your position on the office's ability to simplify, I guess I'll use, tax navigation for low-income households to help them in terms of compliance and free taxpayer preparation services and so forth?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent idea, excellent question, and something I do feel very strongly about. This year I was really disappointed. In the spring, we were trying to bring, additional tax preparer services to some of our senior centers in my district, and we just couldn't. It was just very difficult to make it happen, and so they were doing them at the library, which was great, but it can be tough for seniors to get from there, where they are, to the library. So I do feel really strongly about that and want to make sure both that the regional offices are serving people, but also that we're retooling our online public-facing website so that it's much simpler, a little more modern, that the help is there. I think that there are best practices in websites that change regularly. People get used to how they're navigating things, and so many people now are doing everything on their phone, and they weren't when the current Comptroller website was developed. And so making sure that you can see everything you need on your phone as well is very important. And then finally, I feel very strongly about creating an office of the taxpayer advocate. We are one of the few states in the country that does not have one. And this is an office that is really focused on the consumer, right? On the customer, on the constituent, on the Marylander, right? Making sure that it's a, not just I call the taxpayer advocate office and they shuttle me to someone else, but that the taxpayer advocate actually works to help me solve the problem, helps me figure out where I need to go and what I need to do. So of course the IRS has an office of the taxpayer advocate, and they in fact have a taxpayer advocate in every state in the nation. So if you are a Marylander, you can call the Maryland office. You're not calling somebody in Ohio, right? So I want to make sure that we're building a strong and comprehensive taxpayer advocate office that will really meet the needs of Maryland taxpayers. And part of that is, meeting the needs of low-income taxpayers as well. And then finally, I just say, I've always had a strong relationship, strong working relationship in the General Assembly with AARP, with the Cash Campaign of Maryland, Casa de Maryland, and more. These are all organizations that serve really distinct and important populations in tax preparer services. And they are populations that provide and look out for often and find fraudulent and predatory tax preparers, right? Sometimes they see a faulty tax return that somebody brings to them. We need to work with them more closely too to put a stop and to prosecute fraudulent and predatory tax preparers as well, because I think that is a major, as somebody who's represented low-income Marylanders as an attorney in Fair Labor Standards Act cases and more, I understand, the damage that can be done to our most vulnerable families through one fraudulent tax, form filed, and then you owe so much money, and you have to dig out, and so really putting a stop to many of these predatory practices is an important thing as well.
So, Brooke, let me ask you, there's a lot of expertise in this room.
Yeah.
They're representing thousands of other CPAs and tax attorneys and the like. How do you envision taking advantage of the expertise represented by members of the two associations and professional CPA firms and so forth?
Yes. I will say this is something that I really value people who know what they don't know. I am somebody who knows that I am not a tax preparer. I am not a CPA. Like none of our, Peter Francho and William Donald Schaefer, Lee Goldstein, none of us were CPAs, right? But we help provide leadership so that we can listen to people who are preparing tax returns. We can listen and learn. So I'm excited to be a partner, right? To make sure I've been having, as a candidate even, I have been doing policy roundtables around the state of Maryland. And we had one with CPAs and tax attorneys not too long ago to listen to them about what's working and what's not. I've had, conversations with manufacturers. We've had conversations with farmers and the value-added ag industry. And with, folks in Salisbury about economic development in Salisbury and the challenges it's facing, So making sure that we have somebody who's willing to convene people who have ideas, big ideas, small ideas, to make things work better for Marylanders is something that I've been doing for years and something that I look forward to doing in the years to come. I think if you look at my record in the General Assembly, you'll see not only did I tackle some, rather large issues, gun violence, transit, school funding, school issues, private letter rulings, starting a business in Maryland. Not only did we tackle that, but we did it with broad bipartisan coalitions. Nearly every single bill that I've passed over the past term has had bipartisan support. And I'm really proud of that record. And part of it is because we build coalitions of people who are the experts in their field. And CPAs, tax attorneys, tax preparers, Cash Campaign, CASA, these are experts in their field of what they do. So if we're not learning from them, shame on us, right? So I look forward to having regular convenings, regular meetings with people from around the state to talk about the challenges that they're seeing, the opportunities that we need to ensure that we seize, and to make it easier for Maryland taxpayers to pay their taxes and do business in the state.
So, Brooke, speaking of I'll say bipartisan support, bipartisanship is probably a concept that most of us agree with, but we see very little of, right? And there's a decent chance, I won't predict the election, I'll try to be neutral as the moderator here, but there's a decent chance that the top 3 offices in the state will all be held by members of a single party. And yet, you know, you may be the CFO of the state. So how do you view, you know, it's a political position on the one hand, and it's supposed to be independent, really, on the other hand.
Yep.
How are you going to deal with that?
Yep. I mean, one of the things that I love about and feel strongly about in the Comptroller's office is that it is not about partisanship, right? It's really about partnership. It's about working with communities, working with tax preparers, with CPAs, with Marylanders to make sure that the fiscal affairs of the state are good today and good for the long term, right? That we're getting best value for our dollars at the Board of Public Works, that we're ensuring that it's easy to do business in the state, that we're making clear that if you are owed the earned income tax credit, we want to make sure every single Marylander can get that tax credit, right? So I'm excited to be an independent voice. You know, I'm excited to have support from, you know, numerous Republicans around the state as well, including former elected officials like Alan McCarthy, the former Cecil County executive, and you know, folks who have worked in Governor Hogan's office. So I have always maintained a very good working relationship with the Republicans in the House of Delegates and the state Senate. And I look forward to ensuring that we are focused on making government work better for Marylanders and investing for the long term and being that independent voice in the Comptroller's office.
Good. Yeah. So we only have maybe 2 minutes left, but are there any questions from the audience? Let me start with, I know there's some students here from Goucher, or maybe they left to go to...
They left for class.
They left for class. So no questions then forthcoming from them. So how about the former students in the audience? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Brooke, thank you for your discussion of your passion for not only bipartisanship, but having the Comptroller's office be an information source for the legislators. I think all of us CPAs and attorneys in the room view the information, the perspective that the Comptroller's office people have and how to implement the taxes, that is information that is valuable and should be wanted by all of our legislators. And we very much, those of us who work with you and your colleagues, appreciate the fact that you've had that attitude and you've demonstrated it. Not all of your legislative colleagues have that approach. Many of them have ideas and they don't want to know anything that they don't know. How would you, in the Comptroller's office, work with providing information to the legislators who don't want to hear that information?
Well, we can only do so much now. Look, I think one of the things that I'm excited about is that I have an excellent working relationship with members of the General Assembly from both parties. And so I believe that they trust me to build an office that will provide them important and honest information about how the challenges that they're trying to tackle could possibly be implemented or would have difficulty being implemented in the Comptroller's office. And so I think through making sure that we maintain you know, good working relationships, always being upfront and honest about why things are working or why they won't work, I think is really important. And you know, I have that reputation now, which is why so many of my colleagues came out from the very beginning of my campaign to support me, and why they're continuing to work hard, because they, I believe, also want a comptroller's office that they can work with, who will help make their legislation better and more effective. So I look forward to working with them.
Good. Another question or two from the audience? Yes, sir, and then young lady behind you. Go ahead.
Yes, how would your office of taxpayer advocate interact with the enforcement division in terms of making sure that all efforts are made to resolve potential cases before litigation?
Sure. So the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate in the IRS and in other state agencies is it's almost an independent office, right? It is not supposed to be part of enforcement. It's not necessarily part of revenue. It is an independent office where you can speak honestly and candidly and get help as a taxpayer. So, to me, it's in some ways very separate from an enforcement office, because you want people to be able to reach out to the taxpayer advocate and get the help that they need to be able to solve their tax issues. I'd love to have conversations with you afterwards, and I certainly look forward to having conversations with folks in the Comptroller's office about how to bridge the sort of how do we make sure people can get on a payment plan, right, to pay what they owe over the years. I just worked with somebody in Western Maryland who was put on a payment plan that he couldn't afford. Single dad of a daughter with a disability. And he reached out to me because he just hadn't been able to get through to somebody. And we said, yeah, we're happy to help you. We went right to the office of the comptroller. We were able to pull it up. They fixed it. They solved the problem. He's now on a payment plan that he can afford so he's not going to lose his car, right? They were going to put a lien on his driver's license, so he wasn't going to be allowed to drive to work. So now all of that is resolved. He can continue working. He can take care of his daughter. He's going to pay his taxes off. So we want to make it so that people don't get to that urgent, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my that to me, if you're taking somebody's driver's license away, like that's, they're not going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to pay their taxes. It's crazy. But we need to make sure that the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate can work with people so they don't get to that point, right? That they can be there for folks beforehand. So, and I look forward to hearing from all of you and people in the Comptroller's office about the types of cases that the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate should be working on and should be prepared to handle, as well as talking to folks in the Ombudsman's office, right? About how their work would work within the Office of Taxpayer Advocate too. I hope that helps.
Ma'am.
Thank you for that. It's a great and a really important question. So, I've had the honor of meeting so many amazing women-owned businesses, women business leaders over the course of my campaign. And right now, actually, since COVID, Black women are the demographic that's has the fastest growing rate of business entrepreneurship and starting small businesses in the country. And so we have to do everything we can to make sure that those women have a partner in the Comptroller's office so that they can focus on growing their business and make it easier to pay taxes and comply with laws. So one of the things, thank you for that question, that I look forward to ensuring is that we have those small business owners, those Black women business owners, immigrant business owners, that they have a seat at the table in telling us what their challenges are, right? I want to make sure that we are hearing from them about what they're finding difficult about the process and what would be helpful to them to make it easier to pay their taxes and comply with tax laws. And then two, we need to implement it, right? We need to figure out how to make our tax forms, clearer. We need to make sure that have a website where you can find everything more easily. We need to make sure that in our field offices, we have somebody who can reach out to, sororities, fraternities, faith-based groups, synagogues, community groups, main streets, to make sure that everybody knows that they have somebody in the Comptroller's office who can help them pay their taxes as well, right? So I think that outreach component is a key part as well of making sure that those new business owners know how to interact with the Comptroller's office. So we're reducing barriers to entry. But that's something I'm excited to make sure that we get right, because it will mean stronger businesses, longer term businesses, and growing businesses in the state of Maryland.
Yes, just as we were talking about
Yeah.
before. And one last question? Yes, sir.
It may only be me, but there seems to be certain inefficiencies in the Comptroller's office, and I'm just wondering, for instance, unclaimed property is just impossible to deal with. I mean, it's impossible.
Yep.
I'm just wondering that if you're elected, how are you going to try to deal with these inefficiencies?
Yes, thank you for that question. And of course, every inefficiency has become an inefficiency in its own unique way. And so we do need to tackle them, some of them one by one. But I agree with you about unclaimed property. I'll say my mother is in an assisted living facility, and she has Parkinson's with dementia, and she has unclaimed property. It is very difficult for me to determine how to claim that. It's a very long process I do have power of attorney, but it's making sure there's an ID, it's making sure, and I don't even know what it is, if it's worth it. So it can be very difficult, and really looking forward to seeing both how other states and municipalities around the country do better, what they've done to modernize their unclaimed property, that specific situation you gave me, holdings. And when we find inefficiencies, I find that often some of the folks who see the inefficiencies are staff, and yet they're not always listened to. And so really making sure that there is a policy where if you have an idea to make the office more efficient or more streamlined, you feel comfortable submitting that idea, right? So that's something that I also believe that can help us sort of solve some of the inefficiencies in the different systems, is making sure that the people who are handling these systems feel empowered to say, hey, we can do better. Here's a way that we could cut out, the middleman, or cut out this red tape and do a better job. Thank you.
We're about out of time unless someone is dying. I don't think I saw anybody else, wildly raising their hand. So having said that, Brooke, thank you so much for joining us. And let me give you the last word in terms of any closing remarks you'd like to leave us with.
Sure. This has been a really productive discussion. I want to first thank all of you for taking the time early on a Tuesday morning to be here. I want to thank you for your work that you do. The Comptroller's office is an essential office to make our government work better for people. And that's why I'm running, because I think we are really facing a critical moment here in the state of Maryland. We have some of the most prosperous communities in the nation, but we have far too many who've been left behind, who've faced disinvestment for generations. And I know that at this moment, when we have, for the first time in 100 years, open seats on the ballot at the same time for all three state constitutional offices, we can be bold and we can do better. We can make sure that we are building on the work of the current comptroller to have an office that cuts out inefficiencies, that is people and consumer and Marylander centered, right? That we are partnering with our CPAs, with our tax preparers, with the cash campaign, with service organizations around the state to ensure that the comptroller's office is meeting the needs of Marylanders. I've loved serving in the House of Delegates and playing a leadership role there. I'm proud of the bipartisan work that I've done. And I think, one of the differences in this race is I'm dedicated to ensuring that we're getting that I'm standing up for taxpayers, but also of protecting our values moving forward. This is one of only three independently elected statewide officials. And we need to have statewide officials who represent the values of the people of Maryland. And I'm excited to do that. I hope that I can earn your support in the election. And I hope between now and then you'll explain how important the Comptroller's office is to your neighbors and friends and non-CPA family members, and make sure that they get out and vote this year. So thank you.
I want to thank the leadership of the Maryland Association of CPAs, the leadership of the Maryland State Bar Association, the good team at RSNF, and the good folks at Goucher College for lending us their facility this morning, and Brooke Lierman, a Democratic candidate for Comptroller, for joining us, and thank you all for being here as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.